Start letting folks in. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council for the month of May. We will convene in just a couple of minutes. The virtual room is now open and people are still filing in. It looks like we maybe have half or a little more than half of the folks who have signed up for the virtual meeting room in the room right now. So again, we're just providing the opportunity for everybody to join us, and hope you settle back with your morning cup of ambition, and we'll go from here. Yeah, I'd like to convene the meeting now. Good morning and welcome. It is Friday, May 3rd, 2004, and this is the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. And as always, we start off with a roll call.
One moment, Chair Hall. I am helping Councilmember DeFontorum get connected.
Oh, okay. Well, Director Bell, I'll let you know that I have not prepared a report of the chair for today. So once the roll call is completed, we'll segue right to you. Okay.
Copy that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully she will get connected here.
Okay.
Councilmember Farrell.
Here.
Chair Hall.
Present.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Here.
Councilmember Harris. Here. Councilmember Meehan.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Present.
All right, then that looks like we've got 8 of 9 members, which is more than enough for a quorum to conduct business. So right now I'll hand things off to Executive Director Andrea Bell for the director's report.
Thanks, Chair Hall. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, council members. It's good to be in virtual community with you. Let me just say, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like the state of Oregon becomes a little bit like a musical when the sun is out. So I'm grateful for it. I think a lot of us are grateful for it, and it has been a long time coming. And just appreciation for the time this morning. I know we continue to have a pretty hefty agenda, so I'm going to just run through just sort of a few things, both operational things to keep you aware of, some of which we have previewed or talked a little bit about in previous council meetings, and then a couple of things just to forecast. I think in true nature, the spring and summertime gets to be a really busy time, a uniquely busy time rather for the department. So I want to keep you updated on a few things. So just the first one is, so obviously, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that the agency has grown, certainly in terms of fiscal resources, the number of programs that we have implemented and are in the process of implementing. And one of the areas of agency business that we haven't talked that much about that I want to just preview for some more substantive updates is the focus and really sort of the mandate that has been needed upon us to have a concerted effort to focus on agency operations. And so what I mean by that is as the scale of resources that we have received have increased, that means we get more people, which is great. We can grow the agency, but equally as important is how those people are organized and how our processes are really helping to facilitate and steward present day and future needs. And so what I want the council to just be aware of is across the agency in multiple divisions, we have been really focusing within those divisions, but then also the agency as a whole on strategic operations efforts. So this is really looking at the organizational health of many of our divisions, such as affordable rental housing, housing stabilization, although that is inclusive of those divisions, not exclusive to, with a really specific focus on internal capacity and capabilities, with the overall goal of enabling us to really better serve our community, effectively fulfill what our mission and mandate is. And in order to do that, we not only just need more money and more people, we have to focus on operational excellence. And so with that, that means sort of a couple of things in a high level sense is restructuring how folks are organized, restructuring how things get done across the organization. As you can imagine, it is big and gnarly work, and it requires change. Change is good, and change can be difficult and challenging. And I think just the scale of resources have required us to make sure that we are doing the proper and appropriate work to focus on the health of the organization. These are the things that don't always feel like they're exciting, although to me, they are quite exciting, but it's really focusing on the health of the organization. And so I think with that, you can expect a couple of things and some more substantive updates. Is one, I think just broader detail around what the assessments across those divisions have included, including those across the agency, what we're learning about what's working really well that we want to continue to embrace. What do we need to change, and then how are we going to change it? I think it is not lost on us that any of the progress that this agency has made with support and guidance from our council has been because of the people of this organization. And so this is a concerted focus on the people of this organization, focusing on the organizational health of the organization. And so while that is work that not everybody externally is privy to, these are folks that are keeping all the things going every single day. And then also engaging in really important and necessary change that folks can't see as well. And so this is exciting. It is certainly its own level of time commitment, and candidly, it is a long time coming in so many ways. So we will provide you some more substantive updates around what that means, but I wanted the council to just be aware of that, because we've talked in the past around, it's great that we're having a lot of resources, and how is the agency operationally maturing to handle and to do all of those things. And so this is the work that is naturally occurring, that is needed, and no one has asked for it. This was really us internally seeing a gap, seeing a need, and us taking on the onus to be able to do that work. And while certainly not one for public emotions, I just have to acknowledge just the fantastic nature of the people of this agency. They energize me, they keep me going, and they make a lot of the work look so easy that I know is not, and are also having a whole lot of other heavier lifts to help us better fulfill the goals that we have in really concrete ways. So want to just acknowledge and give so much love and appreciation to the folks at this agency, and we're excited to evolve in this new way. And so we're excited to share more about that with the council, but then also share not only what we're learning, but then how that's helping us to steward and be optimally prepared for what's coming as part of that. As a secondary sort of operational update in there as well. Some additional gaps and I think opportunities that we'll be working towards from an executive level presence as well is, you will remember that some time ago that the agency had a chief financial officer. That was a formal position, that was a formal office that we had. We did some restructuring over the last few years ago and made some different changes with that. What I expect to be part of sort of the operational improvements that the agency is going is a reestablishment of that position and that office. As you can imagine, for a finance agency, we need a very specific and concerted office to really focus and help steward our goals from a financial perspective. And so that will be an additional executive level position that will be reestablishing and working towards. Also, the council might also be aware, about 2 years ago, we established a central services division, and the whole purpose of that central services division was to really focus on a collective alignment of some of our shared business services that allow us to do all the things that we do. So when we think about project management, other business services, IT, just to name a few. And we will continue to need that level of internal alignment to ensure that our day-to-day operations are operating in alignment with the broader agency priorities. And as part of that as well, we will have an executive level position that is focused on the operational health of the organization. So we had a central services administrator, Sarah Roth. Sarah Roth has since moved on. We're so appreciative of her work and contributions. And I think as we have assessed what the agency needs are, we need a higher level position to really focus on operational priorities of the agency as well. So there'll be some forthcoming just details about that, just wanting to make sure that folks are abundantly aware of that. And then specific to housing stabilization, Jill Smith was operating and leading our housing stabilization team for the last couple of years. She remains with the agency in a different capacity, overseeing our energy services team. So you will get you'll hear from our housing stabilization team today on a youth program, and that will be led by Liz Weber. So we'll have some more updates to come on that. But I wanted to just give the council just a little bit more of a more substantive peek behind the curtain on operationally what is our current priorities in the context of sort of all the external goals that we bring to you and that and then there will be more updates on that. Secondarily, the Oregon centralized application. So over the last handful of months, you have been gracious with allowing much of the agenda to really be on this particular topic. So over the last few months, we've talked to you about the intention and the why behind changing our NOFA process, which historically has been really focused on competition, and with the reality that we continue to contend with, the people of Oregon continue to contend with not having enough housing, not having enough affordable housing. We saw a very clear and demonstrative opportunity to re-optimize the NOFA to be better situated to help facilitate our goals and to help really make sure that we're maintaining fidelity to our values, and certainly not watering those down, but also making sure that with the scale of resources, we need a different vehicle that can help steward those resources. We have talked in detail with all of you about capacity funds, evaluation standards, pre-development, cost controls, funding caps, all of the very nitty gritty detail. And I want to just acknowledge for this council that it has been incredibly valuable. Your feedback has been incredibly valuable to us. And I want you to know that that is not lost on us or lost in vain. There are so many of our partners, 200 plus of experts across the state that have dedicated so much time to giving us critical and necessary feedback as we have not only pursued a future state that is very different than what the historic nature way of doing business has been as it pertains to the NOFA, and certainly just honestly grateful for people trusting us to give us feedback, because we also engaged in a very different way than what we had been in the past, which was to have a greater practice of power sharing and shared decision making and building something together. And so my hope is that people, even if we don't agree on every facet of everything, can feel like the process was effective at stewarding and collecting feedback, and that people can see themselves represented in some of the decisions today. So candidly, just want to thank council for allowing us to take so much of the time to deconstruct all of those very important pieces to help us build them back in a way that will be a better product, a better process that we can forge in together. So want to acknowledge council feedback today. Director Datweiler-Davie will talk us through some updates on that and then a voting on that, but wanted to just make sure that we didn't miss the opportunity before putting it up for a vote to just acknowledge the process, to just acknowledge the process on that. And then the last thing is it is the month of May, which is about the time that we start engaging in the preliminary steps around 25-27 budget build, which I'm sure is probably a little bit of a mind exercise to think about, because we are so in depth on 23-25 implementation. There's still so many things coming your way that we need feedback and direction on. And what I want to signal for council is that we are preparing for engagement on 25-27 budget, 25-27 budget build. As this council knows, we have provided you an abundance of updates around what has been the priorities for the legislature, how has that manifested into policy and investments, and then what does that mean in terms of the context of where we are going as a state, in the context of furthering progress from a housing perspective. And we have been grateful here in Oregon to have an abundance of resources towards housing. And when I say housing, it's housing under an expansive view, housing for capacity building, housing for culturally specific agencies in a way that we haven't seen before, infrastructure resources, all types of resources to help generate more progress in housing. And many of those investments have been one-time in nature. And we know with just the realities of supply and demand, the realities of what we know the need is, one-time investments are not best suited to help steward an effective system that's going to deliver progress, real progress in the way that people need it. And so we'll be keeping that frame of really wanting to understand of those one-time investments, what is really needed to keep those one-time investments as a current service level. How do we get from a place of just one time and unpredictability, and where can we create some greater predictability in some of those areas that have historically been one-time investments? And then also going into the 25-27 budget build and engagement to really do a lot of listening, candidly, to do a lot of listening and feedback around where we and the collectively, when I say we, it's not just OHS, where we as partners and all of the experts across the state will improve and expand existing programs, and then of course developing new programs as needed in alignment with both the governor's priorities, but just want to signal for you that we're beginning those early steps of engagement. And what you can expect from us in that engagement process is we went back to all the feedback from 23-25, and there was no shortage of it. And I think of that 23-25 feedback, we want to make sure that we are bringing that into how we approach this budget build, and much of that will be on having more time to listen, much more time to listen and make sure that we are getting feedback from our partners on some of our shared priorities. So the council can expect from us some process updates to come, and then also updates and forecasting where we can expect to engage the council and make sure that your feedback and guidance is represented in that process. So with that, Chair, those conclude my updates. There'll be some forthcoming more substantive things as a follow-up, just to make sure the council is getting those things detailed and in writing. But for now, I will yield back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Director Bell. And we...
Oh, I do see one hand up from Councilmember Lee.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Director Bell. That was a wonderful overview of a lot of really important work, and I'm thrilled to hear it. My questions and comments really have to do with the role and the engagement and participation of the council in the development of the budget. And particularly how it relates to the needed update or refresh or 2.0 or whatever we want to call it of the statewide housing plan. And when I think about, I am so appreciative of the work that the department does to talk to communities, to talk to our partners, to get that information in and process it and, digest it, make meaning. However, I don't want to be, as a member of the council, a passive receiver of information that has already been processed, understood, made meaning of. Not that it's bad, but I do feel that part of our role is to actually help, not direct, but sort of help frame, help push forward, help advise the department on what the budget priorities should be for the next 2 years. And as a part of that, I know we've had so much other work to do. Our statewide housing plan needs to get, we're at the far end of it. We need to come back in there. And it seems to me it's particularly important in times where there is significant additional resource and all of the restructuring and the internal work, which yay, to get the right people, the right amount of people in places, that it's even more important that we understand what the overall guiding star is and where we're trying to get to in the future, not just 1 year or 2 years, but where we're trying to get to the future, because without that, we're sort of flying in the dark, right? We can see what's in front of us, but we can't assess what's in front of us in relationship to where's the longer goal and where are we going. So I know you all are thinking about that, and I just want to put a pin in. It's also part of the council's responsibility to help be a part of that and participate with it. So I just want to say, as we're ramping up, and I see the ramping up all over the place, spring, right? I want to make sure that we're talking right now about what the council's role is, what our responsibilities are, and how we're going to engage before we get to the point where we hear what has been said, what has been collected, and what has been made meaning of. I don't know what that looks like. And I think it would be worth some conversation at the council meeting at some point if we were at time with the business we had to do. But this also feels like business. So thank you for an incredibly informative report. And it just leads me towards, we got some more work to do on the council side of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. And now we move to the report of the Housing Stabilization Division. Director Weber, are you here?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am here. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, members of the council. For the record, my name is Liz Weber. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the interim director of the Housing Stabilization Division while we search for a permanent director. I am here today as a follow-up on a February presentation. We were here with discussing the Youth EHA program. At that February council meeting, we provided a high-level overview of initial engagement efforts and proposed program design. Since then, Judy Huey Pasquini, our homeless services policy strategist, has done a lot of work to do additional community engagement, and she has developed a detailed program design and funding proposal to bring to council today. Judy is having some very unfortunately timed technical difficulties today, so I'm hoping she will join us, and if not, you're here, Judy. I'm so glad. I'm glad to see you made it. So great. Judy has just done phenomenal work building out this program with the team. So I'm so glad that you will get to present the work that you've done. As Judy shares the information at the end of the presentation, we are requesting a Housing Stability Council decision today of the use of direct cash transfers within the program. And so with that, Judy, if you're ready, I can hand it over. And I don't know if your difficulties have been resolved enough that you want me to run slides, or would you like to run slides?
I think I can run slides.
Okay.
Let's see how it goes.
Okay. Thanks, Judy.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and Housing Stability Council members. For the record, my name is Judy Huey Pasquini, and I am the Homeless Services Policy Strategist at OHCS under the Housing Stabilization Division. And I am going to share screen, and I'm hopeful that I won't have any other technical difficulties. Okay, just a second. Okay. I hope everyone can see that screen. Great. So as Liz mentioned, I am here today to present about on Youth EHA, the Youth Emergency Housing Assistance Program. We did bring it to Housing Stability Council in February for some guidance and direction in our initial program thinking around it. And so but our purpose here today is to provide a briefing on program design recommendations and also one decision point from Housing Stability Council, and that is the use of direct cash transfers. So I just wanted to remind the council about this funding stream. And so we received $5 million in one-time funding to provide services for school-age children, K through 12, and their families who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And these funds are one-time, however, they can be rolled into the next biennia. And so with the engagement sessions, we did bring this, as I mentioned, to Housing Stability Council, and our initial framework was to target investment to regions that had the highest numbers or highest percentages of homeless students, according to the ODE 22-23 annual report card. And we completed our engagements in mid-April. We spoke to stakeholders, local planning groups, and McKinney-Vento liaisons in each of these regions. And throughout our engagement sessions, we got a better understanding of the needs and the current investments that are happening in each of those areas. As far as the REIT goes, we are utilizing the racial equity analysis toolkit as we are designing and implementing this program. So that is going to happen throughout. The committee is made of members within OHCS from policy, from program, and performance evaluation. And we expect to continue that as we go into implementation. So from those engagements, we did start to outline what this program would look like. And the first would be like participant eligibility. So the applicant must be a resident in the state of Oregon and school-aged youth that is K through 12, including unaccompanied youth, and or the family of a student K through 12. And then the next would be the housing status. And what we heard is that in other funding streams, we haven't specifically called out the use of the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. So we've added that to the 5 categories of housing status here. We are not requiring income limits on this program because in order to be eligible, they need to meet the applicant eligibility and at least one of the 5 categories under homeless status or housing status. And so these are the 5 regions that we are proposing to fund. Part of Housing Stability Council's recommendations was not to have a prolonged application process. So we are recommending direct awards and awarding these entities specifically. All the agencies listed here are involved in youth or homelessness collaboratives in their regions, or they're leading the collaborative efforts through their task force offices. Even though we are recommending direct awards, there will be an application and scope of work. We expect and require grantees to demonstrate a relationship between the educational and housing systems and a detailed plan for referrals. Many of these collaboratives that we are recommending for funding have McKinney-Vento liaisons as part of their work groups, and our approximate timeline for contracts to be ready for signature will be the end of August and hopefully in time for the beginning of the academic year. Okay. And so the funding allocation is distributed in this way. And so we see the 5 different regions that we're proposing and then the percentage of funds. The way that we came up with this funding allocation was a base amount of 500,000 per region, and then it was based on homeless student numbers from the ODE report card as an additional factor in the calculation. As far as the eligible uses of funds, this is a snapshot of what we typically allow for homeless programs and also prevention funding streams. And this doesn't encompass everything, but is just a snapshot. We go into much more detail in the program guidance. I did want to call out the ineligible expenses. So this funding is not going to be used for acquisition, construction, any rehabilitation or remodeling or capacity building. So our intended outcomes, I really just wanted to focus on this prioritization of students and families, and also collaboration to strengthen critical response systems in targeted regions that are serving at-risk or homeless youth and their families. And my last slide here is really the decision piece and what we're asking council regarding direct cash transfers. So we are recommending that direct cash transfers be an allowable youth AHA expense and program delivery type. We do currently allow direct cash transfers within housing retention and homeless services programs with the approval of Housing Stability Council. And direct cash transfers can be utilized to create basic income pilots in the youth EHA funded regions. And so with that, I would love to hear council's feedback, but also discussion on the decision point for the cash transfers.
I'm going to take chair's privilege and speak first and to say I want to offer a great big enthusiastic yes to this. I have been studying universal basic income for about 10 years now, and it's like transforming. It's amazing. So I will be supporting this. Council member Mary. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that in my 25 years of being an advocate and a program developer, director, expert working with unhoused families and children, especially under the McKinney-Vento definition, this might be the first time I have felt heard in terms of my advocacy for this population. And I just think a huge kudos to Judy for the depth of work that was done to get stakeholder impact or input from so many different levels, and that cross coordination with Oregon Department of Ed, because they obviously have a shared interest in this population. I just really appreciate that. Doesn't happen a lot, as we know, hence this even being a conversation. Today, I'm really excited about some of the aspects of this, including the potential allowing of direct cash transfers. There are some really exciting models that are out there that provide some framework and background. So this isn't just coming out of nowhere. And I think that it's a really exciting way to try some things in these regions that could have a really long-term lasting impact. And I'm very appreciative for this work. And I hope the council recognizes the importance of this particular population and needing to sort of lift it up separately from maybe some of our other initiatives. So thank you, Judy, and everyone who worked on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Chair Hall. And I'd like to echo the fantastic work. Being a person that's been on the side of accepting needing help from the McKinney-Vento, as well as talking to my local McKinney-Vento folks here in Gresham, the collaboration between McKinney-Vento and receiving these funds for families is huge. That's one of the biggest complaints in our region with McKinney-Vento programs and families is that they don't really have this direct connection and collaboration to get families what they need, storage units or deposits or whatever it is, so that direct cash thing is just amazing. And I'll definitely be squeaking about this over here in the Gresham Barlow School District about the accomplishments that you guys have made. That's wonderful. As well as UBI. I am so excited for UBI. I think that it's there's some really great models, and I'm really excited to see what we can put out for our own models here in Oregon and see if we can get that moving forward, because I think that UBI will be a very interesting and productive way to help some of the wealth gap between low income and affordable housing and whatnot. So thank you so much for your work and for listening to us. And I really appreciate the forward progress for these high homeless areas, kids that are experiencing homelessness. I mean, those numbers are outrageous. So really excited that we're addressing it directly. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I will mention that our Lincoln County numbers are very high, over 800, but just a few years ago, before we saw some of our lift projects come online here, it was over 1,100. So a lot of young people to serve, and I am excited about this for so many reasons. Again, the sense of dignity, the empowerment, letting them know we trust you to make the right decisions about your life and your future. We're not going to be the heavy-handed government folks making you fit into a few narrow boxes. Anybody else want to be heard on this? Well, would somebody, Mary.
Just have one last comment, and that's just a plea for future consideration that under the federal definition of McKinney-Vento, it does include pre-K youth. So the idea is that the earlier you're intervening and helping to stabilize families, especially with infants, toddlers, and pre-kindergarten kids, the more successful they'll be upon entry into kindergarten. And McKinney-Vento programs are required under the federal guidance to coordinate with those early education and pre-K programs as well, including Head Start. And so in the future, if there's consideration in legislative asks around the McKinney-Vento definition, I would just ask that it be like 0 through grade 12. That's it.
Okay.
Anything.
Anything else from the council before I entertain a motion?
Please let me move it. Please,
Oh,
please let me move it.
Okay, Mary, it's yours. Yes, I understand.
With $150 billion percent enthusiasm. I forwent comments because I knew I was going to be superfluous, but please let me move it.
Okay, you can do it, Mary. Take it away.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, everybody moves in seconds, but but we do need to take a roll call to make it official.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Just out of an abundance of desire to be very clear and transparent, since the agency I work for would potentially be one of those funded agencies, I'm going to abstain from voting.
Thank you. Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Most definitely, yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes, this is so exciting. And if we can start it from age 0, that's fantastic because yes, the data is out there that the earlier intervention definitely helps with future success.
Great.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Yes, of course.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Wow, Council members, I really like and respect you all and the backgrounds you bring to the table and the wonderful diversity we have, but you all got to work on your enthusiasm level a little bit. No, this is wonderful. Okay, Judy, did you have anything more in your presentation?
I don't, but I do want to express my appreciation to the council for your overwhelming enthusiasm. And, you know, I'm really excited to see these funds go out into the community. So thank you very much.
You're most welcome. All right, homeownership division now, and is Director Giscombe online?
I'm here, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Hall, prestige members of Council, and Director Bell. My name is Kiba Giscombe, he, him, his pronoun, and I'm the Director of Homeownership. We're excited to follow Liz Weber and Judy's presentation. It's really good news. And we also are hopefully bringing very good news as well to our 10 projects that we are going to be recommending today for our NOFA. We would like to remind everyone that we listen to our partners and also this council to make some of the changes to our NOFA process within the last year. And with no delay, I would really like to pass this on to Jessica McKinnon to do her presentation. Thank you so much.
At this time, we will open up for public hearing testimony regarding this topic. We have one person who signed up to give comment on this. Peter Hoover, are you ready?
I am, but can you hear?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I've been having some challenges with phone and audio, so. Chair Hall, members of the Housing Stability Committee, good morning. I'm Peter Hoover. I serve as the Executive Director of Sisters Habitat for Humanity. I deeply appreciate, and I mean this sincerely, I deeply appreciate the work you are doing to ease the housing challenges in Oregon and the support and guidance that's been provided to our affiliate of Habitat by your Senior Program Analyst, Jessica McKinnon. Our LIFT applications for Adams Commons and Woodlands home site are before you for your consideration. As you consider our application for Adams Commons, please keep 3 critical and distinguishing facts in mind. The first is the extreme shortage of vacant residential housing, land in Sisters. Our city has a small footprint. The most recent data published by the City of Sisters confirms that nearly half of the land that was vacant in 2020 was consumed by mid-2023. Sisters Habitat has control over the land upon which these affordable homes will be built, but it is contingent on our ability to build. If our LIFT application is not approved, the chance to build affordable homes will be lost as the land will go on the open market. Second, the location of this development is ideal for affordable housing. The home sites lie in a cottage development overlay zone, which enables smaller lot size, smaller home size, reduced setbacks, and similar characteristics. And this was all specifically enacted by the cities of Sisters to foster affordable home development. Funding from the City of Sisters, crucial to the viability of this project, will be lost if our LIFT application is not approved. Third, these homes are uniquely and ideally located for low-income households. Jobs, support services, grocery stores, medical facilities, and schools are all within a few blocks. This is another unique feature of this project. Our application also includes funding for affordable housing in the Woodlands subdivision. Through significant cooperation and partnership with the owner and with LIFT funding, we will be building homes for households with incomes at less than 60% of area median income. Our Woodlands homes will have the same desirable proximity features for future owners as possessed by our Adams Commons homes. Combined, approving our application enables the largest response to the affordable housing shortage in the history of Sisters. I implore you to please give favorable consideration and bring this to reality. Thank you for your time and your careful consideration of our applications.
Thank you very much.
That will now conclude the public testimony section for this topic?
Director Giscombe, are you speaking? It looks like you're still muted.
No, I just had to pass a presentation on to Ms. Jessica McKinnon.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you see that? Great, thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction, Keval. Thank you, Peter, for your feedback, and thank you to Chair Hall and Housing Stability Council for having me today. I'm Jessica McKinnon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Homeownership Development Program Analyst for the Homeownership Division. Today, I'm bringing you our first round of recommendations for the 2024 Homeownership Development Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA. To start off, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the major changes to this year's NOFA. So the first and perhaps biggest one is that we've converted to a rolling NOFA. This means that the NOFA will be open again, or open until September 2nd, or until all the funds are expended, and awards will be given on a first come, first served basis to applicants who meet the minimum scoring criteria, rather than a competition for the highest scores. This change has a lot of benefits. We can ensure that we receive and award quality projects. We can add some more requirements at application that weren't possible in the former model. We can meet developers where they're at in their project rather than making them stick to our timeline. And I think the most beneficial change is that we were able to provide additional feedback and support our applicants. At minimum, we intend to bring our recommendations to you today and then in August and November. We may bring some more frequently, or we might bring some more in between those months if we receive applications earlier in our timeline. The next big change is what we refer to as the RESC category of developers. That abbreviation stands for Rural, Emerging, Small, and Committed to Equity. Applicants who are eligible for RESC receive three major benefits. The first is the LIFT set aside. So half of the LIFT funds were set aside to be available for RESC applicants to ensure that they had the access to funding in this new first come, first serve model. The second benefit is that the LIFT supplemental funds are exclusively available to RESC applicants. LIFT supplemental are those grant funds that are meant to assist partners when LIFT isn't enough to fill the gap. The third benefit is that RESC partners had a slightly lower scoring threshold requirement. The specific details on that are in your packet. The last big change I wanted to cover is that this year, thanks to the flexible timeline of the rolling NOFA, we've started requiring appraisals with the application. This means that the projects that I'm presenting to you have requested the full amount that they need or that they're eligible for, and that their pro forma is completed and evaluated with that full amount. There has been a little bit of a change management concern. Appraisals can take a while to get, and we do require some very specific details in that appraisal. So there were a few hiccups during evaluation, but ultimately we were able to get everything resolved. And this change did make us adjust our scoring process a little. I just wanted to quickly walk through that with you. So the first step in the process is the preliminary review. This basically makes sure that all of the pass-fail items are good. So details like if they have site control, if the appraisal backs up their LIFT request, and if all the documents are submitted and signed. We had 3 preliminary reviewers, and each application was reviewed by 1 reviewer. If there were any concerns, I personally reevaluated and confirmed. This was our first opportunity then to collaborate with our partners during the evaluation process. Here we were able to reach out and allow them to address any concerns. If there were any significant issues like with the appraisal or the pro forma, we were able to schedule a meeting and talk through our needs and any next steps. These meetings helped us feel more confident about a project and also allowed applicants to make sure that their materials met our needs. After receiving all of the documents and updates, we were able to move on to threshold scoring. So this year we implemented a very specific, transparent, and objective rubric, which should be in your packet. The items in that rubric were evaluated by external partners, including culturally specific organizations, internal equity staff,
DOJ, and were included in your approval in December. Applicants were asked to score themselves using that rubric, and then 2 OHCS staff members also scored each application. Both scorers met for each application and went through the different categories. If we both had categories passing, then we considered that category passed. If one or both of us felt that the application didn't meet the minimum requirements for that category, we then went line by line and compared scores with each other and with the applicant's self-score. If the category still didn't meet minimum, we'd work together to determine what the applicants could provide to make us more confident in that application. Then this was our second opportunity to collaborate with the applicant and ask for additional information or clarification on anything that we felt was missing. And this ultimately let us review and score projects rather than how well someone could fill out an application. So here's the full NOFA pipeline for 2024 as it currently stands. We've offered 40 million total lift divided between the RESC set aside and the general applicants, and then 5.2 million lift supplemental. Today, I'll be recommending 10 applications approaching 20 million lift and 3.57 million lift supplemental. We have received 2 additional applications already set for 6.6 million, which we may bring to you before August. Then we have 7 other projects that we've received pre-applications for, totaling roughly another 20 million. So in that first gray box, you can see the total interest that has been expressed for projects with amounts that exceed the available funding. We aren't guaranteed to receive all of those applications and move them forward, but it is great to see so many are interested in LIFT this year. The second gray box shows what is still available if all the recommendations today are approved, which means we haven't yet received applications in that first come first serve system. Sorry about that. So with all of that out of the way, the first project we are recommending is 1201 East 5th Street in Newburgh. This is a small project by Newburgh Area Habitat for Humanity. The project is for a single stack townhome with 2 units on a corner lot in an established residential neighborhood less than a quarter mile from downtown Newburgh. Each unit will be 1,200 square feet, cost a little over $500,000, and they'll sell for around $250,000. We're recommending $225,000 lift and $175,000 lift supplemental. These units will have a variety of climate resilient features, including pervious pavement and rain gardens, as well as heat pumps. They plan on the lower unit going to a veteran household with the option for additional accessibility improvements. Newburgh Habitat does have a solid history of equity work, which you can see in their results, with almost 3/4 of their households identifying as households of color. Adams Commons is our next development in Rural Sisters by Sisters Habitat for Humanity. This is a neat cottage development in downtown Sisters. If you're not familiar with downtown Sisters, it has sort of an old Western aesthetic, and they're working closely with the city to make sure this development blends into that aesthetic. We'll be funding 19 affordable units, and they'll be building an additional 5 workforce units. Construction costs will be a little over $400,000 per unit, and on average, sales price will be just over $200,000 per unit. We're recommending funding for $3,040,000 lift and $760,000 lift supplemental. This development has a lot of energy efficient features, including solar panels and drought resistant landscaping and limited accessibility and visitability features in some units. Sisters Habitat is taking major steps towards equity in their community. They've consulted with a DEI consultant and developed a 3-year strategic plan that includes equity as a focal point, and 1/4 of their households identify as Hispanic. We're also recommending Breath of Life Medford, developed by Turning Point Program. Turning Point is an emerging developer looking to build their first project in partnership with us. It was very clear that this project has been a labor of love for the developer, has been 5 years in the making, and is supported by a wealth of experienced contractors, consultants, and partners. This request will support 38 units, which is the first phase of a larger development that will include both rental and homeownership. There are just a few smaller units available, and then most of these units are 2 bedrooms. This phase as a whole will cost a bit over 14 million, and the units will sell on average for about $177,000. We recommend funding this development with 5,220,000 lift and 800,000 lift supplemental. This development really takes the local innovation part of LIFT to heart and will be an early concept in Oregon for prefabricated panelized construction, which should cut down on both cost and time to build. This development type is also incredibly energy efficient, and to support that, there will be a sizable solar array on site that should offset at least 80% of homeowner power costs. The units were developed with trauma-informed design to support a target community that includes households with disability, survivors of domestic violence, and households displaced by wildfire. In Medford, they have specifically also worked with the Spanish-speaking community to ensure that their designs meet the needs of local residents. And excuse me one moment. Sorry about that. So up next is the Hope Street project by Columbia Gorge Habitat for Humanity, who will also be a first-time LIFT partner this year. This development will be a fourplex in Hood River. This is really exciting because that represents both a growth for this developer and the first restricted affordable homeownership development in Hood River, where housing has been growing increasingly more difficult to obtain for those living and working there. This is apparent through the value of the land that was donated to them, which is over $1 million, and will support this and one other fourplex, which will be built at a later date. Each unit will be 3-bed, 2-bath, costs on average nearly $640,000 and sell for an anticipated $300,000. We recommend providing this development $605,000 lift and $195,000 lift supplemental. Though small, Columbia Gorge Habitat has taken steps to improve equity in their organization and communities, including training and coursework for leadership and partnership to provide their residents IDAs. They have solid MWESB outreach, and their landscaping company is both minority owned and owned by a Habitat homeowner. Myrtlewood Way is a new development from Habitat for Humanity Portland region that emphasizes the LIFT goal of family-sized units. This development in Gresham has 20 units total, including 13 3-bedroom homes, 5 4-bedroom homes, and 2 5-bedroom homes. A portion of each of these unit sizes will be set aside for households earning less than 60% AMI. Habitat Portland is a long-standing partner, so we know that the quality of these units will be great. The total cost is approaching $11,780,000, and the homes will sell for an average of around $195,000 each. This project has received significant additional local funding, including ARPA and Metro Bond, and we recommend providing $2,680,000 in lift. This project is close to a lot of amenities, specifically green space and public transportation. It's rated as very bikeable, somewhat walkable, and good for transit. Equity-wise, Habitat Portland has launched some new DEI initiatives, including I-10 lending and initiatives advancing Black homeownership. They have an established history of serving communities of color, with 75% of their households identifying as households of color. Next is Rooted at 19th by Rooted Homes, formerly Core Community Land Trust. This is part of Rooted's expansion into Redmond and includes 22 2- or 3-bed duplex units. The project cost is about $460,000 per unit, and each will sell for roughly $270,000. This project has significant additional support through grants and financing, and we're recommending $1,799,996 lift and $800,000 lift supplemental. Rooted Homes maintains a partnership with Housing Works that allows them to offer homeownership opportunities to households with a housing choice voucher earning as low as 30% AMI. This has allowed them to serve a more diverse community, with 57% of their households identifying as households of color and 71% as first-generation homebuyers. All of their residents will benefit from low energy costs through their net zero homes, and Rooted Homes furnishes all households with an electric bicycle. Next is another Rooted Homes development, Rooted at Antler. This is part of a much larger development in partnership with Housing Works that will include homeownership, rental, Housing Works offices, supportive services, and possibly commercial. There will be 18 duplex and cottage units costing roughly $395,000 per unit and selling for $263,000 per unit. This development has a lot of similar benefits to Rooted at 19th. Additionally, 4 accessible duplex units are also designed as in-home child care centers. We recommend $1,470,000 lift. Southtown 2 is a second phase in a larger development by Dev Northwest. Later phases may also include rental and commercial in an opportunity zone and urban renewal district in Corvallis. This phase includes 16 townhome units, each a sizable 1,500 square feet. These units will cost a bit over $500,000 each to develop and sell for $300,000. This project received HUD congressional community funding, and we recommend also supporting at $2,015,610 lift and $800,000 lift supplemental. Dev Northwest is a longstanding partner with a commitment to equity in homeownership and reducing historic asset inequalities. Initiatives to support their communities include individual development accounts, down payment assistance, credit builder loans, ITIN mortgage products, and a portion of their ground lease fees go into personal reserves for home maintenance. Our next development is Timber Cottages by Bend Redmond Habitat for Humanity. This development includes 13 2 to 3 bedroom cottages in Redmond. Each unit will cost $465,000 and will sell for an average of about $180,000. This project was also awarded HUD congressional community funding, and we recommend supporting with $1,450,000 lift. This development is close to amenities and includes a mix of 1 and 2 stories to allow for different needs, including accessibility and aging in place, and includes energy efficient upgrades, including solar panels. Bend Redmond Habitat has seen a renewed commitment to equity, has developed a DEI toolkit, and is working through a handful of initiatives to improve equity in their organization and their community. And last but not least, the Woodlands development in Sisters. This is a second request by Sisters Habitat for Humanity. Sisters Woodlands is a much larger development, mostly market rate, and Sisters Habitat was invited to build a number of affordable units within that larger development. The external design of the homes will match the fabric of the neighborhood, providing a true mixed income experience and opportunity for the home buyers. This ask is for 5 units, including 1 triplex and 2 cottages. The units will cost on average $400,000 each and will sell for $184,000 each. We recommend awarding $910,000 lift and $40,000 lift supplemental. And with that, here's a summary of all of the projects we're recommending, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Jessica, for a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate the description of the process. I appreciate the snapshot slides on each of the projects, really helpful because, as you know better than anyone, 10 projects are a lot to get through in terms of understanding. So thank you for all of that. I really appreciate all of the work. I have a couple of process questions and then a sort of larger question that I wanted to ask about. First of all, I love the number of projects in which we're partnering with Habitat for Humanity. For me, it feels like the right level of engagement with the community who said, we're going to volunteer and we'll take this forward and we're going to work together to build these home ownership opportunities. So I just want to give a shout out to the work that Habitat is doing and the work that we're doing with Habitat. I think it's wonderful. I am curious about the Medford project and the reference to victims of the wildfire. You know, we've done so much funding and work collectively through the emergency management program of the department. And I'm just curious whether there has been any connection between that funding cycle, those projects, and this project, because it would be nice, you know, again, I'm always looking for places where different projects or funding streams within the organization are relying upon and informing each other. So if that opportunity hasn't happened, I think it would be a nice one. I would love to see a very clear priority for wildfire victims to come into those apartments. I know it says they're one of a number, but I'd love to see that priority examined. I'm super curious about how appreciated the process piece, and I love that people evaluated themselves, and then also there were external eyes. Just love it. Were there any projects where a racial justice and equity lens evaluation, right? Because that's one of the things we're evaluating for. Were there any projects where there was disagreement or discrepancy in what the two sides of the evaluation looked at or assessed? And if so, what was offered or asked for as additional information? And was any project denied as a result of not being able to resolve, quote unquote, the issue of racial justice and equity as one of the 6 lens and criteria? And you don't need to answer that now, because I'm sure you don't have it at the top of your head, but I'm just interested to see, as we get more skilled in applying a racial justice and equity lens to our processes, which I support 100%, it would be interesting to see what we're learning as a result, right? Were there specific, were there common things that people all needed to go back and take a look at? Were there common gaps that we saw that, point to a need for technical assistance? I'm just curious, as we continue to move forward and increase our skill set as an agency, what we're seeing and what that analysis looks like. And then finally, this has nothing to do with these projects. However, we have a couple of projects that are land trust projects. I would love to have some information or just some schooling from staff around the issue of land trust as a project. I think on one side, you have people who say land trust is a way to responsibly use the common good to maintain the land in trust. On the other hand, you have issues of particularly for people of the global majority, perhaps otherwise known as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who are not in favor of land trust for a variety of reasons, also relating to, the land back movement and all of those kinds of things. Who is holding the land in trust, and who are we holding it for? Those kinds of questions. So I am not making any moral statement on any of this, but I'm curious about, what do we know about land trusts? Who's for them? Who's not for them? What do they do? What are potential downsides? And a future council meeting, I'd love to just get a little information about what staff expertise thinks. So those are my questions and comments. Congratulations. Really appreciate the presentation.
Great. Councilmember Harris.
Thanks, Chair Hall, and thank you, Jessica, for the presentation. I agree that this is all really helpful and clear information that you provided. I just had, I wanted to note that I also appreciate the overview of the environmental and energy efficiency aspects of the building, especially the solar, net zero, and especially the heat pump in the Newburgh project. I did have a question. I was curious if cooling systems, there's any baseline for cooling for these projects.
We didn't ask any specific questions regarding cooling on the energy efficient side. There is a space in the application that did mention what type of heating and cooling was provided, but I don't have that information on hand, but I'm happy to get it to you at a later date.
Yeah, that's okay. I was curious because I think it'd be helpful in the future to include that, specifically the cooling element for these projects. I think that is a critical component for new construction housing, and it would just be really helpful to see. And I think something that we should continue to challenge ourselves to provide for all of these projects.
I will just chime in and say that many of these projects, we ask if they're meeting a certain level of energy efficiency and are working towards a specific certification standards. And many of the habitat projects are meeting Earth Advantage standards. And so that comes with specific requirements around heating and cooling. And I think most other projects are working towards those types of standards as well, but happy to provide that information in the future.
That's great to know. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Farrell.
I very much echo, I think, word for word, everything Councilmember Mary Lee said, so I won't repeat it verbatim, but I am just curious back to that Breath of Life Medford project, which I'm not familiar with other than what was in the packet. Like, what was the mechanism for verifying that fire victims will be prioritized? Because I know maybe it's neither here nor there, but we do have some previously funded projects that were intended for fire survivors, and that is not actually who is being served in those projects. So I'm just I echo that question, and I'm just curious what that process was.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We are requiring a lot of these equity pieces, maybe not in the grant agreement, but as a part of compliance moving forward. Since we had scoring related to equity and we had, the special equity criteria. Any applicants that make these future promises that we're going to serve wildfire households, we're going to do certain community outreach in the future, we will be holding them to those factors moving forward. So, we don't have guarantees that wildfire survivors will be the ones moving into the homes, but we will be asking that question as households start moving in, and we will be, tracking compliance with that for future awards.
Ready? One moment, please. All right, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on that. Thank you, Councilmember Farrell, for raising it again. I would love for us not to be in the situation of afterwards understanding that there could have been an opportunity to house survivors of the wildfires after the houses have already been spoken for and taken up. I would rather have us make a clear priority ahead of time that says first priority, because of our commitments in every other part of the programming and funding that we have, our fire survivors come first. And then let us know how if they offered fire survivors and had that outreach and they had no takers, then we used, the next important people on the list. But this practice of we've told them we're interested and then we look afterwards, there's nothing to be done afterwards because the house has already been sold. We have to be proactive with it and say, for these funds, we have a lot of expectations, one of which is you tell us before you sell the houses or your outreach, how fire survivors had first access to the housing before anyone else. And so I want us to think about where those lines live. We want to be in partnership with folks, and we also have responsibility to the statewide agenda, which includes making sure that survivors of the wildfires who still are not taken care of yet get first access to any new resources of whatever sort that come through here, but particularly home ownership. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. And let's see, I thought somebody else had their hand up. I guess not. So are we ready at the decision point now? I'm seeing some nods and not hearing anything. So would somebody like to make the motion in the packet to approve all of these projects?
So moved.
A second, please.
Okay.
Okay, can we have the roll call now, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, moving right along. Renaissance Commons bond refunding. Who's got that?
Hi, Chair Hall. This is Natasha Detweiler Davy from Affordable Rental Housing. I think we were on the agenda. There's a break before we start, but we are happy to start if
Oh, right.
so inclined.
Whoop. Yeah, I was rolling right along. We were rolling right along and I skipped right over that break. Yes, let us take
Understand.
that break, please. We will recess right now, 10:15 a.m. and reconvene promptly, and I emphasize promptly at 10:30. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for making it back by 10:30. We'll look to see if the chair is on.
I am.
Perfect.
And it appears we have a quorum back. All right.
That is
Taylor?
Chair Hall.
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay, then let's resume.
At this time, we would like to open up the floor for the public hearing comments regarding the transactions. We did have one person sign up for that, Ross Hamlin. However, I'm not seeing Ross's name. If you are attending via phone only, if you could use the raise hand function so we can allow you to speak. All right, doesn't look like Ross has joined us. That was the only person that signed up for public comment regarding the transactions. We will now close the public hearing comment section.
Thank you very much. And so we'll move into the transactions themselves and ready for a staff presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall, Director Bell, Housing Stability Council. For the record, my name is Natasha Detweiler Davy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Affordable Rental Housing here at OHCS. And so today we have another full slate agenda for you from Affordable Rental Housing. First up, we have Ty Denson-Strain, Assistant Director of Production, to introduce and present 3 conduit bond 4% transactions for final bond approval. These are all 3 projects that you have formally seen reviewed through their NOFA awards from either LIFT or preservation. And at this point, we are bringing forward for the final conduit bond financing. Later, the next transaction is a reissuance of a project that you've seen before a couple times that we will talk about next, and then we will transition into the Orca space to be able to get some actual, hopefully recommended votes for your consideration. So I will kind of unpack more follow-up between each of those transitions. But at this point, I'll hand it to Ty to introduce these three projects for approval.
All right, good morning, Chair Hall, council members, Director Bell. For the record, I'm Ty Dudson-Strain, AD of Transactions, and here to present a couple of projects for approval today, beginning with Mountain View Townhomes. It's a 72 unit project sponsored by Stewart Development in Klamath Falls. We have this project was previously awarded LIFT funds, OHTCs, and now we're coming back for the 4% bond approval. It includes a range of affordability and unit sizes. It's new construction. There is conduit bonds of totaling over 16,500,000. Total development costs is around 30 over about 30. Sponsor is sponsored by the housing is also has in partnership the Housing Authority of Klamath Falls with MOUs with the Oregon Human Development Corporation and Cornerstone Community Housing to provide culturally responsive services and support to tenants. And they will be doing partner outreach to several entities to ensure affirmative outreach of historical communities is taking place. The project is anticipated to close this May, and the MWSB targets, the general contractor, is committed to meetings the participation goal of 20% MWSP participation. So with that, we can continue to the next project, College View Apartments, sponsored by Housing Works. Housing Works, and it's in Bend. It's a new construction with the received LIFT and 4%. The project also includes a range of unit sizes, all at 60% AMI, and the City of Bend is also has committed a City of Bend loan. The project is requesting a little over 13 million in conduit bonds. The total project cost is a little over 24 million. And with that, Housing Works has MOUs in place with several culturally specific organizations to ensure affirmative marketing and to incorporate culturally responsive support in their property management efforts. And the project, the contractor is committed to a 20% MWSB target. The closing is anticipated to be this June. And continuing on to Cypress Hill Apartments, it's a scattered site development sponsored by Chrisman Development. This was previously awarded preservation funds and OHTCs. There's the project. Sites are included in the Dalles, Cascade Locks, and Reach Port. The total conduit issuance request is a little over 11 million, with the combined aggregate cost for all three sites. Total project is over 22 million. Chrisman Development is entered into MOUs with a culturally responsive organization, the Next Door, to provide culturally responsive and bilingual service support to tenants. The closing is anticipated this June 13th, and with that, I'd open up for questions for all three of these projects before we move on to the one more transaction for the slate.
Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you for the presentation. Let me lower my hand because I don't want to keep looking at it being raised. Anyway, I would just like to be reminded about the process to check in with the contractors. All of them have committed, to meeting specific targets. They have MOU agreements. One of the reasons why I want to be reminded is because, well, first, let me back up and say that I like the fact that these projects are outside of the Portland metro area. And so I think that's good. However, as we expand into other areas, the specific marginalized communities that we want to target are fewer in numbers. And so I want to know or be reminded what the process is to make sure that the people who we want to prioritize to get into these units are the people who, the property management company is reaching out to, because to me, yes, you can put stuff down on paper, but where's the proof, or where's the beef? So that's my question.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. And I think I will take a first stab at this, Ty, and if you or Roberto want to chime in behind, that would be welcome. But I think, overall, what projects have when they are being developed is and put into place are tenant selection plans. And so those are documented strategies for affirmative marketing, for ensuring set-asides are implemented in compliant with strategies and legal oversight around those. And so where we have projects or units that have set-aside uses for specific populations, that is tracked through into property management. All of these projects will follow affirmative fair housing marketing strategies to ensure that there is affirmative marketing to be reaching historically underserved communities. And more than that, also wanting to ensure that in the whole project concept design, there's deliberate work being done to intentionally align with serving and meeting the need of BIPOC community. And then I think on the MWSB, those are program goals that are tracked through construction. I think recently Claudia Cantu, who is our MWSB analyst, has provided some information and updates to you around how that process works. We are pivoting, and I think we'll see that come up later in the evaluation standards to say that, yes, these are our expectations and everybody needs to actually meet them, where we are seeing that there are performance struggles, working to make sure that projects are bringing on resources to be able to make sure that they do moving forward. And I don't know, Roberto, on the MWSB side, or if you have any other context to any of that you'd like to add into that response.
Sure. For the record, this is Roberto Franco, Assistant Director of Development Resources, and also overseeing the application teams. Yes, currently on the MWSB, we ask the developers to submit reports at least in three phases during the construction or throughout the construction. At initial conversations or dialogues when the closing financing is happening, we go over what they're going to do and what target, what firms, what trades they're going to be in. 6 months or at about 50% of construction, we also ask that they provide to us a report to see where they are. Are they still on target, or are they doing some shuffling to make sure that they are on target? And then at the end of construction, when things are wrapping up, we also get a final report to see where and how they did in reaching that target. Once the construction is done and the units or the project is starting to lease up, then that's where our MWSB tracking and compliance sort of stops. Right, so it's true that in the new process, we're going to look at how the developers, if they're coming in for a new project or new application, we want to look at what and how they did previously in their MWSB commitments, so that we can tidy up what they could do differently in this new process. So it's we've got some means in our processes established to hold them accountable as well. And I think that our partners have gotten used to working with us, that they understand better and differently how they can reach some of those targets in there. Maybe, I don't know if quickly, Natasha, but on the intended tenants for a project, it's also part of our portfolio and compliance and monitoring when they go out to make sure and looking at the files, the tenant files, they also do a review to compare with the fair market and housing plan, to compare, because the project has to comply with the funding requirements and the other policies that we establish. So our colleagues in compliance and monitoring also help us there to make sure that that housing site is being used or is housing people as intended to.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you for that overview of how we're measuring and tracking. As we're coming close to the end of the fiscal year, right, June 30th and into July 1, I would like to request that we have a report, not only from this program, but from the other programs in which we are, we've stated an expectation, people have told us what they're going to do, and now we're checking to see how close did they get or not or exceed. It'd be great to have an overall report, not, this project did this or that project did this, but for instance, in this situation of, the projects we funded last year, and we went through and did those 3 check-ins over the course of the project, how many are on track? How many are not on track? And what have we learned about them not being on track? Same with compliance. Again, Roberto, I hear very clearly that's not this program, there's a whole compliance team. But it would be nice to get some year-end reports, and maybe they're just status updates because we're, projects take a long time. But this practice of being able to report back and see what we might be learning overall is a nice component piece to all the work that everyone is doing to set expectations, have people tell us what they're going to do to meet those expectations, and then checking to see if they've met the expectations. That reporting back to the council, I think, is an important part of that loop. So just make that request. I know there's a lot going on. Doesn't need to happen next month, but as we go through to the end of the fiscal year, it'd be nice to see some of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think we have MWSB reports, so we could be making sure that there's we keep those turning. And I think when we last brought MWSB for discussion, I think committed to an annual update, of course, to be able to continue that. So I appreciate that. And I think we need to be probably doing more, expanding this. I think reporting and transparency is another thread that I'm going to tie into our ORCA discussion as well. So thank you.
Okay, anything else from the council at this point? So.
And so I think, Chair Hall, we do have one other transaction, but I think there are 2 different motions for those. So or 2 different write-ups for those. So I think perhaps first it will make sense to consider the resolution in the Housing Stability Council packet on page 34.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, now can we have the roll call, please? Bill?
Sorry about that, Chair Hall.
Okay, no problem. Let's begin the roll call, please.
Thank you. One moment.
Mhm.
Councilmember DeFontorum,
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thanks very much. Yay. All right. Councilmember Harris.
Thanks, Chair Hall. I just wanted to state that for the record, I'll be abstaining from voting or discussion on this next item.
Okay, thank you. So we are ready to roll along.
Yes. Great. Thank you, Chair Hall, Housing and Stability Council. So next up for the transaction, and this is a different type of transaction for bringing to you today, and I think is incredibly reflective of the unique market situation where projects have been navigating extreme volatility in all areas, and not the least of which is the lending market and interest rates. And in this case, we have Renaissance Commons, which Ty will do a narrative overview, reinforcing the materials in the packet to you in just a minute. But I think I just wanted to queue up kind of the way I would explain what this project is and what has happened. I think that this is a project that was developed, incepted, initially financed in a lending market that is very different than we have today. And so as the project has completed construction, has been occupying with tenants in there, receiving services and supports from the property and reach, the overall anticipated income is no longer able to justify the size of the loan that they are needing. And I think layered in there is the huge increase to interest rates since the time that was first memorialized. And now these are really unique challenges to this market. There were a lot of specific circumstances for where this project was hit with unanticipated realities of that. And so what we are bringing forward today is a reissuance, and there's all of the right technical words in the Housing Stability Council packet, but where they've had to change the lender, the permanent lender on the project, and need to now convert out of their construction loan, pay off the money that was used to build it, and into a long-term loan with a different lender. We need to have those bonds reissued. That is not something that we have done. We don't do that normally. And again, is warranted here because of the specific situation. I think also part of the council packet motions are acknowledging the fact that we do this so infrequently that we don't actually have a charge that's responsive to this specific ask for projects. So included in the motions in the housing stability packet includes a motion to establish the charge so that we are able to implement this. It's not unexpected, it's not unanticipated, it is just wanting to make sure that we have the real authority to do the work as we need to support this project transition. This is a tremendous project that is providing a real need for housing and community in alignment with North-Northeast preference. And so it is really important endeavor to ensure that it can reach stability and be able to really prioritize operations moving forward exclusively. And so I think with that, I will hand it off to Ty for the more formal part of that presentation, but I think that was my understanding. So any discussion after that is certainly welcome.
Yeah, so yeah, just want to also just formally, and I mean, the REACH team has done Herculean effort, but keeping this project going. And, you know, I definitely want to acknowledge that this was a very, very, very unique situation. And I mean, admittedly, like the project financing, the previous approval that came to Housing Stability Council was like in 2019. So just acknowledging all the work that was you know, to make sure that, you know, that credit is due. So with that, you know, the projects, it's 189 units. It's in Multnomah County, includes LIFT, GHAP, and 4% tax credits. It includes a range of units from studios to 3 bedrooms. It is slated to be back on track in closing. I think this. I think we're trying to close this month. But you know, due to a host of market conditions, we are back here again, seeking a reissuance approval, and just to note that, you know, there's you know, the city reaches entered into just reiterating a whole host of partnerships to better serve residents and provide health services and do outreach to communities. And with that, I ask that if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
All right. Let's see. Councilmember Mena is first.
I thank you for the report. Question that I have is, I understand the struggles of releasing out the project and the policy that Portland has. Where's the project at with the releasing? Have they made any adjustments in order to, or what kind of adjustments have they made in order to be able to lease up the project to its fullest? And what is the timing for that?
I think, well, the lease up piece is complete, is complete. So now we're but now we, you know, based on the sizing of the permanent financing, those assumptions that were happening under lease up, they essentially needed to come back and figure out and you know, redo their capital stack, and with adding a new lender to the mix. That's essentially why you know, approval wise, we needed to, you know, just, you know, come back and just make sure everything is documented appropriately. But the leasing, the critical component on the lease up piece is essentially complete.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ty. I think the other part is just acknowledging that there have been challenges with rent collections. I think traditional strategies and challenges that all projects are navigating, and that the owner is working in close collaboration with Portland Housing Bureau around the North-Northeast preference, and finding tenants to be able to occupy units where there are vacated units and tenancy challenges, kind of across the portfolio, including finding where they can be tying in rent assistance and other supports from in the metro communities. But I think, yeah, so this is a building that is operating, it is occupied. I think striving to maintain full occupancy is still a goal, and has been part of what has been challenging for the permanent underwriting and for the permanent lenders to see surety that the full loan will be able to be paid, but that those challenges have really been navigated. And at the same time, interest rates increased so much that the anticipated size and scale of the permanent financing is not sufficient. And all of that has taken quite a long time to navigate through. And the sponsor themselves have put in a significant amount of their own resources to sustain the project in the meantime, which is appropriate, right? These are development risks, these are ownership risks, and we have seen them take all of those active ownership steps and have done that. And the solution now has been identified. It requires, another effort here, but it is within reason in our estimation, and is critical for getting the project to a place of stability, so that there is can be less focus on this last transactional piece to close out construction, exclusively to focus on tenants and making sure that it's providing an opportunity for households to thrive.
Councilmember Lee. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to clarify a couple of things from my own understanding. So we're both allocating additional resources and agreeing to a reformatting or I'm not going to have the right words, but a recommitment to the financing schema that is put together for this project, correct?
Yes, I think we are doing both. So it's redoing the financial, I won't use the right legal words, but redoing the financial stack, the permanent financing. Construction has been addressed, and despite the owner putting significant organizational resources and developer fee back into the project, across the board, there was still another financing gap, and we are layering in additional state resources to be able to address that. We have assessed it is consistent with our program policy intents. It is aligned with Northeast preference, which is a significant backbone of equity and racial justice strategies in the city of Portland. And I think those are all the hats through which we feel comfort with that. And again, the criticality of getting the project fully placed in service and closed out of construction so that we can really, focus our attention to those aspects of it. Absolutely.
Thanks. I have a couple things I want to say, and I support this project fully. I will support the motion once it comes to us. I think we have to take a hard look. I mean, since I've joined the council, which was a long time ago, we have always talked about the volatility of the market, the volatility of the lending world, the volatility of, interest rates, et cetera, and that has not changed. It's only gotten more so. I am interested in understanding, and particularly because this project is part of a racial justice and equity initiative, right? How do we understand what these projects actually do cost to get them over the finish line and into stability? And when I think about geographic engagement, where we have all talked about, there's just less numbers of people to be doing these types of projects, I am really wondering about what does it really cost and how do we anticipate that, not because people need more help or they're more unable than a usual project, but just there is the reality of everything we talk about that's at systems, that's at historical and current experiences. And I would rather have us adjust for that up front. Now, we can't anticipate everything, but I would rather have us adjust for that up front. And Natasha, I think that's part of what I heard you say, which is we didn't even have a mechanism for this, and now we're creating the mechanism. And as we go forward and we're doing our financial due diligence, I want us to keep that in mind for the stack. As the fiscal people, right? Are you impressed? As the fiscal review happens for these projects, I also want to understand precedents, right? So now that we take this action and I support it, where are we going to have other situations where people are going to come, rightly so, and say, hey, I had unanticipated costs related to my loan financing or my rent lease up or my whatever. And I just want to understand this in context to the overall strategy. So I'm not speaking against this project. I really want us to take some further learning out of it, because I think it will and does has implications for the rest of our work as we continue to move forward. And you know, a lot of projects started in 2019, and a lot of projects went by, and a lot of projects actually were executed, right? So
yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And I think Councilmember Lee, I appreciate so much all of those sentiments, and I think will be an amazing transition conversation over to talking about the ORCA and the future funding process and updates. And I think I also will just want to identify in unpacked words for Housing Stability Council that this was not a one conversation that got us to this place. This has been really challenging, iterative work with the developer, with Portland, the city of Portland, with OHCS, with all of the different parties, so many lenders, so many critical places that have been part of the really trying to find solvency for this project. And across all of those, we have been applying a rigorous hat on what are the true you know, what are the real scenarios, where can other places for resources come to. So I am confident that we are not setting a precedent that when you have a problem, just come get us to solve it. And I think that that is incredibly important. I also think kind of very clearly in my mind that our future process needs to incentivize truth telling, needs to incentivize real costs, and that when and that is something that will be so much more possible outside of the competitive framework and into our future process. I think I'm sure actually that we will learn so many lessons about that, and there will be a lot of places of learning where we will need to come back to make refinement. So I'm not going to promise perfection, but I do think that any of that is taking us further to the place where we can really again be seeing the full picture, not wanting to act as though that we don't work in a marketplace, and to really make sure that we're really incentivizing units into community, not onto desks.
Yes, absolutely. Appreciate that. And my last comment is racial justice and equity isn't cheap. There is a cost and a need for investment, and we got to just say that up front. As we look at these projects, I think then it puts it more on us to really understand whether a project is promoting racial justice and equity as opposed to inclusivity. And we gotta pay, we gotta invest, we gotta do it if we're gonna really be about racial justice and equity. So thank you, Natasha. Totally appreciate it.
Thanks, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Just a couple of things. One is definitely kudos to the team. I mean, it's very difficult to have this type of conversations, and I'm sure they took a long time and a lot of difficult troubleshooting and to find a solution. I had to read that memo two or three times to really understand what's going on. So kudos to the team on finding a solution to this huge problem. Just a question, and I doubt that there's a response, but is there knowledge of any other project that, not exactly this problem, but that has an issue in these times that we have with construction costs going up and all those things and having problems in transitioning from construction to permanent loan that we are aware of?
Council Member Mena, I think, yes, we are tracking this closely. This is not the only project that has these struggles. This is the most severe case. So I will say, I don't think that this is that this specific intervention will be warranted in all cases. I do think, and we are navigating those. I think as we are looking at the next conversation, next recommendation around the pipeline last gap resources, I think our intention there is to do surgical precision to figure out how we get the projects currently under construction that are challenged over the hill. I think, again, aiming as much as we can to remedy that with resources already in the project or with other innovative strategies. And there will be some places where modest intervention will be needed or adjustment to bond issuance or others. I think this really having a new lender on board is a different piece of that, and that has been more unusual. But I think as we have remedy, and I think we can be bringing back ongoing discussion around that and updates about what we are seeing and where we are deploying those critical needs.
Okay. Any further input from the council at this point? Well, hearing none, what are our next steps here?
In the Housing Stability Council packet, there are a few motions for consideration.
Okay. And is there any chance we could get them on the screen, please?
Yes. So I think I see that they're on page 48 of the Housing Stability Council packet.
Okay.
Moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Anybody, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mary. All right, a roll call now.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Abstaining.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Thank you. We should do still have quorum and the motion does pass. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much. Anything else from the Affordable Rental Housing Division?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair Hall, Director Bell, Housing Stability Council. I'm very excited to be able to be bringing forward to you recommendations coming out of all of the last, it feels like 5 years, but probably has been 6 to 8 months of work with you, talking about what we are wanting to do and achieve in our funding effort. And so there's a lot in here. So I'm going to screen share. Just kind of, I think, start with thinking back on what it is that we are trying to do. And I'm sorry for the repeat of slides, but again, it's just, these are monthly conversations. So just a refresh of where we are. I think, tied very much to the conversation we just had. What we are wanting to accomplish here, our objectives are, we want to increase access to affordable rental housing investments. We have the Executive Order 2304 requiring us to do more, get more housing, more units. And so part of that solution is figuring out a different way to offer resources that can grow the pipeline while lessening the risk of funding gaps. And so I think this is a critical place where when we provide an upfront funding reservation, 1, 2, sometimes even longer years before it even starts construction, there's just a really large path of exposure to market volatility. So that is the market volatility even before we get to the place of building. And we were just looking at a project that had experienced unique impacts from that volatility even after the construction process. And so wanting to implement resources in a way that is really deliberately and intentionally looking and focusing on that. We want to increase our own clarity and consistency of requirements, making sure that we are putting into place policy requirements across all of our resources. And I know that we have had those conversations as well as Housing Stability Council, where one type of project feels and looks a little bit different than the rest. And fundamentally, we should have standards, and we want all projects to meet those standards. So today, what we'll be doing is digging in on first, and this slate of recommendations is all around what resources are we going to offer, how are we allocating those resources across the state and to different organizations, and how are we making sure that we are addressing all of our impact needs and policy requirements. Informing all of that are the identified values that we're bringing in here. And again, it felt important to identify what our values is for this project so that we have a decision-making guides for us. So these are kind of thinking about what our bright lights are. We want to make sure that we are expanding production. We want to have predictable and available resources. We need to be incorporating tenant-centered strategies. We need to serve the state, not just one community and not just one area of the state. And equity and racial justice needs to be incorporated throughout all aspects of it. And so it's not actually last on the list, but it's throughout all of the pieces of it. And I think, and then this is kind of brings us all together, all of those different components into our new Oregon centralized application, the ORCA, as we are calling it, which you can imagine has fun, different GIFs and pictures of orca whales all over the place for fun. But it is an exciting new application. And I thought I would ask Roberto Franco to talk a little bit about the work of the ORCA and how that looks in his team and across Affordable Rental Housing Division.
Yes, sure. The one of the new or changes that we've made to all of this is that with a centralized application, so we move from having individual resource managers create their NOFA. With a centralized, we needed a different structure by which we bring the applications in. And so we establish a new team within our division, the applications team. I like to describe the application team as that door through which applications flow. And that's every developer that wants to request funding has to come in through that door. And in that door, then the application team creates the flow for the applications that could come in, that could go to the resource managers, could go to the underwriters or the transaction team, and could go to other teams that have a say in evaluating an application. The intake, while it's one of the steps, it's not one of the main because everyone has to go through it. At that intake, we ask developers to provide us the general concept of the project that they want to come in, their idea of what financial resources are going to need, the kind of partnerships that they're going to bring in. And then within that intake, also any developer that wants to work with us could also ask for resources. So if they need pre-development, for example, to complete their project or their application, that's the space or the opportunity where they can get that. That's where they can also ask, we would like to work with a technical advisor, or because we're new to this process, we're new to the state, that's where they can ask for that as well. And so with that intake, it gives us a sense what is coming, through our door. if we could look into that intake process, if there's a project that might be coming in a year because they're still working on it. Every week, that's what our practice right now. Every week we go through a number of the intake information to make an assessment. Do we have everything that we have in order to move it to the impact assessment, which is really where we get a more complete application. If that intake doesn't provide us enough information, then we can go back to the applicant and say, we're still missing some elements before we can open an application process for you. So I think what this has given us is the opportunity to really have this flow of information with the developer before they can really move. It creates an accountability step because then we can tell a developer, you haven't met the standards that we expect here, so we need you to work and come back so that we can move it along. It also allows us, meaning as an agency, to give the information so that hold us accountable for what we are expecting. And so it's really, I think it creates that conversation with the developer. It's not a punishment, but it's really finding the best way for a project or an application to move forward. The application I mentioned earlier, the application team is a new team. It's a team of, or will be a team of 6 people, currently 5 right now, led by Ed Brown, who used to manage and oversee our resources with the GHUB program, for example. They again work with many other parts of the division to make sure that we can get through all of these processes here. And like I said earlier, they are really that door through which the applications flow. The intake went live on April 17th. And as we would expect, that first day, we got a lot of intakes. Currently, we have 98 intake or application intakes. Not all of them will, of course, move to the next step, which is the application, but that's, again, where we review them to see where they are. So we have now the 98, and that includes for-profit developers, non-profit developers. There's actually an intake from one of the tribal communities for housing. We are seeing requests, or we're going to see requests through that intake for new construction, for acquisition, rehab, for preservation, maybe for adaptive use or reuse of some of the properties. As we get really into this, and when the full ORCA fully launches, we're beginning to see what adjustments we may need to make, so that when we launch it, we can fully be available and be a support and assistance to developers. I assume that as we open up, we're going to see more, and the technical advisors are really part of this, because that's, again, where we can deploy the resources and the assistance where it might be needed.
Great, thank you, Roberto. And I think, fundamental to all of this as we're putting our work into practice, I think planning and building in intentional places where we are able to, we'll be evaluating how is it going? Do we need to make shifts as we go to make sure that we're being responsive to the need? And so I think there's probably a few places where I'll mention that and reinforce it. But again, wanting this to be a system that works, to be supportive, have accountability and transparency. And I think part of that is now also understanding and working to find the ways. We have a lot of work already put into making sure that we can have a clear listing of resources that are currently still available, what has been committed, and in what step of this process it is. I think as we look to intake, there's some other aspects that impact that in terms of real early concepts. It might not be helpful to the project for us to share their location, then that might cause negative impact to the viability. And so want to kind of balance that carefully and be able to provide transparency about what we know pipelines are. And I think honestly, the idea that we have a list of 100 projects that we know organizations are working on right now, whether it's for applications this year or in future years, is so exciting to be able to speak with objective clarity that this is all of the information provided. I think we've done a lot of work over the years to try to be able to speak to it with conversations here, there, and everywhere, asking for things, but this is the first formal place we've had where we get to hear everybody's voice. Anybody who has a project to add into intake, please do, because that is the way we will have it on our radar and know where we are can be speaking as we are talking with the legislature and others around resources that we think we could deploy to support affordable rental housing development. This is one of the now new mechanisms we have to be able to do that with real with data to back us up, which is exciting. And I think, wanting to unpack a little bit more on the equity and racial justice throughout these strategies. And I think, Councilmember Lee, you were talking about this earlier, that this requires intentionality. And I think it also requires being responsive as we are creating the project design and as sponsors are developing project design and we're evaluating projects for meeting our standards. I think we see that there are many different areas where equity and racial justice is infused. And I think I grouped them here into two different ways, two different sides of those coins. And I'm sure there are many other ways of thinking and talking about it as well. But I think of those as project characteristics to meet BIPOC tenant needs. So what are the location and building design factors that are responsive to tenants? What are the services? What is the outreach? What are how are tenants going to be BIPOC tenants feel like they are welcome, encouraged, and in housing that is responsive to needs? And then the financial component, because we are a housing finance agency and we have a huge opportunity for impact, positive impact in equity and racial justice in a place and at a time when historic housing policy has been exactly the opposite. And so thinking about the ways that we can ensure that there is expanded use by culturally specific organizations, expanded partnerships, MWSB usage for building the project, but not thinking of that as the outside bounds of where we want to be pushing and growing. So I think there's a lot of pieces of this that are reflected in the idea that even if an organization is not BIPOC led, we are requiring everyone has a diversity, equity, and inclusion agreement in place, which is asking them for information on specifics of what they are doing. And then we will go back to say, and how is it going? And tell us now what your next steps are. And so I think those are all, again, learning practices, both for us as an organization and also for our developers that we will be funding. And I think noting here, I think part of what often happens in our external conversations on those agreements is you're asking us to do this work, but you're not doing it. And I just think this is the different conversation. We are doing it. We are investing heartily within our staff to do our management, our staff, and our efforts to make sure that we are also kind of implementing our own DEI strategy in OHCS. And so I think those are big conversations, of course, also coming up in Housing Stability Council in other conversations, but I felt like I wanted to just acknowledge that those are also standards we're holding ourselves to. And so next I'm just going to walk through the resources, what they're flagged and intended to be used for. This is largely revisiting prior and now just as a recommendation here at this point in time with the idea of leveraging our resources to foster development. The majority of resources we see here are flagged for general development capital. We have adjusted these. These are largely LIFT resources flagged in here. The home resource for future years hasn't been finalized at the federal level, and we have had some good opportunity to invest those in the 9% cohort of projects that you approved last month. So right now, so as we track the federal conversation, as we have resources that end up available to add, we will add them, but just holding space there now. Otherwise, PSH capital is derived from our state investments as well as the National Housing Trust Fund. Preservation rental capital, we are using both state allocation of preservation funding as well as a portion of our general housing account program resource. That $50 million is split into a bucket of financial and physical loss, imminent risk of loss for our portfolio, and those are a different strategic intervention where it might not need comprehensive refinancing or rehab, but there's a critical piece that is putting that project at imminent risk, wanting again to give ourselves the tools. So we're incentivizing projects raising their hand and telling us what the challenges they are experiencing on outside of our compliance visits. And so outside of those places, but saying if we have tools, then we'll be able to understand those challenges more as they are happening versus after the fact. And then also expirations of federal project-based rental assistance. These resources will be deployed through the preservation framework, which you previously had many conversations about. $10 million for manufactured park preservation, $30 million intentionally for Native Nation dedicated investments. And those are being funded through our general housing account program and housing development grant program resources to be able to have resources that can explicitly be invested on tribal trust lands, either as in ways that those that will end up working for those projects best. We have 30 million in dedicated veteran resources from that general housing account program, and then a new state investment in agricultural housing grant program resources. In 2024, we are not offering low-income housing tax credits, so all of those resources are intended to be offered and deployed without federal tax credits. So those projects that we see on that intake that Roberto was talking about earlier that will be reliant on tax credit leverage are not going to be submitting at this first opening, but instead would be in the wait to be able to submit when project resources to meet that, the tax credits are available. We do have our agricultural workforce housing tax credit and the OHTC, the Oregon Housing Tax Credit, Affordable Housing Tax Credit, which is a lender credit that reduces the interest rates. And so in terms of how each of those resources are used, I think more information we've discussed and is included in the packet. For the general development resources, intend this to be used for new affordable units, which is either kind of explaining that this is expanding the supply side of affordable rental housing. So whether that be through new construction or acquisition of like new market housing or conversion of housing that has previously not conversion of buildings that had not previously been housing to increase the supply of affordable restricted housing. Permanent supportive housing. This is our initiative tied specifically to addressing chronic homelessness and includes related rental assistance and services funding from the state, preservation resources, manufactured park preservation, and others. I don't need to repeat it twice probably. In terms of this is a new resource, this agricultural workforce capital, and as we previously introduced, discussed, and provided based on recommendations from the developers and organizations that serve agricultural workforce. We are intending for those to be deployed with 25% going out as pre-development resources and the remaining 75% as grant funding to be able to support projects that serve the agricultural workforce. And then we have additional resources that we will be offering in 2024, kind of the top of this table, the $30 million in last gap resources, capacity resources, and then our existing land acquisition program and pre-development funding, which we've previously walked through here to be able to make sure we could get those into place as we launch the rest of this. Anything that's not fully subscribed this calendar year will be moved into the 2025 resources, and then the resources listed on the bottom. I think, you know, after this part where we are getting the approvals needed to implement the ORCA with our GAP resources, we will be engaging into the qualified allocation plan to be able to roadmap the incorporation of tax credits into this process as that for when getting ready for when we have tax credits again to offer next year. And so we'll you'll have more conversations with us about that, then including around what the policy parameters are for these, you know, subsidy limits, et cetera, for resources that we would be putting out to pair with tax credits. In terms of the last gap resources, and I think Councilmember Mena, this kind of ties back to your other question around addressing gaps and what we're going to be doing there. Wanting to make sure that we are having identified clear resources to be able to remedy. So at this point, we have flagged 30 million in resources, largely Article 11Q bonds. And so this is both looking to see where we have projects under construction, and a modest increase of investment will help get that over the barrier currently in place. And then also projects seeking to begin construction. I think overall, the place where we are navigating ourselves out of our commitment process that has landed projects on desks that are not ready, or, you know, I think that we want to use this resource to say, are we going to be able to address it? Yes or no? And I think the clarity of getting a no is a good answer. So if they're saying, if a project is saying, I need 40% more resources to do this project, and we're going to need to significantly change what we are delivering into community, I think the no needs to say, okay, we'll return the resources and now reapply for a project that is fully financed, and we can evaluate it using our standards that we are putting into place. And so again, wanting to get to the place where we get these units into community, but we need to be able to have some swiftness to this and to kind of get back to the expedient part of our delivery. And so overall, really wanting to focus on incentivizing production and making sure that development teams and our own organization are focusing on projects that are real and getting ready to be able to be developed. Capacity resources, I think we had covered this update last month in conversation, identifying $4.8 million in capacity resources to go out through the ORCA. I think noting that this is a lot of capacity resources we will not be able to offer ongoing to all organizations. And I think this is derived and funded right now through our General Housing Account Program capacity investments, where I believe 10% of the overall resources are flagged for capacity. There's fluctuation based on the collections, but it will not be the case that we have $4.8 million moving forward every year. We have built up that balance and are really excited to deploy it to be in alignment with the goals that we have identified here with the ORCA, putting $4.8 million out with a total investment of $150,000 per recipient, and holding for those first 6 months resources so that all Native nations, public housing authorities, and the balance of state would be able to access that $150,000 for their organization if they so chose. If they don't choose, they will go back to the general pool, where we will also have resources to support culturally specific and rural organizations. And so wanting to make clear that we are having those resources. It's not about competing for the rural housing authorities and the Native nations. It's not a competition. So they would be able to come in and say, yes, I want to do capacity. These are investments intended to foster and expand production or foster and expand asset management over existing portfolio. And so there's really wanting to make sure we have really deliberate impact from those, but that we are investing in the backbone of our housing authorities and Native nations. And so I think with that, I might just pause there before we move over to set asides, and I'll ask Mitch to cover that, but wanted to know if there are any questions of at that. I know that was a lot of resources to cover. So I'll just pause in case there's questions that are top of mind.
Council members, please raise your hand if you have questions at this point. Well, hearing none, I think we'll move on. Oh, Councilmember, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hall. This is just a process question. It is a lot, and I am striving mightily to keep up. I know we have decisions to make on all of the information we just got presented and are about to see. Is there some reason why we shouldn't do each one separately rather than them all as a whole? I'll honestly say I don't know that I can access back what I just heard after hearing 2 or 3 more other presentations.
I think that's a process question. I think I'm relatively agnostic about. I think the part that we have just covered, I would call the funding frameworks for them. The next is really the funding set asides. And so I think we could have 2 motions, that one is the funding resources and the second is the set asides, or at the end we could say we do one for the full slate, but I will bow out and you all can discuss, I think.
So Chair Hall, just as a clarity for process detail, I think there is discretion here. So as long as council is voting, taking a vote on the totality of all things, it could either be one separate, it could be a separate one, as Natasha mentioned, and then one on the subsidy limits. I think my humble recommendation would likely just to do one vote on the totality once council is updated on the forthcoming information, but ultimately discretion to the chair and council.
Okay. I think it would be perhaps just best procedure to go through all these presentations and then either do an omnibus vote, or if one or more members have concerns, we could break it down into individual items.
That's great. Let me just withdraw my question and suggestion. I wasn't trying to push one or the other. I will do my job.
I also think there's the unlike project approvals, these are framework approvals. So there's a lot of words in here. And I think we are describing it, talking about that, and all is relevant to that general motion to say, yes, let's do the thing. And I think from that hat, I think, again, it could be one way or the other, but I think that I think it'll be, yeah. Okay, so I think with that, I think next up is set asides, which I will hand to Mitch to loop back on.
Good morning still, council members, Chair Hall. My name is, for the record, Mitch Hanoush, Senior Policy Analyst for Affordable Rental Housing Division, using him pronouns. And yeah, so just to kind of reiterate our set aside commitments that we've brought to you a few times, we are proposing the 25% off the top set aside for culturally specific organizations and nonprofits developments in rural communities, and then splitting the remaining 75% across 3 regions of the state based on sort of the ONA, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis information, based on underproduction, and based on council feedback. We added in housing burdened BIPOC households to that calculation. I did want to flag, we received a request last month to speak with Director Savara's team about some of their data that they were incorporating or presenting on as it regarded BIPOC homelessness around the state. We worked with Director Savara and our research team on this. There were some challenges based on regions, and the point in time count data is by continuum of care as opposed to the ONA, which is by county, and some issues with sort of directly overlaying those two that were not unreconcilable, but created some issues. We also, so then we dug in a little bit more on what that data looked like, and how it kind of compared to some of that rent burden data that we were using for BIPOC households and found that they were very aligned. So we were getting similar outcomes by incorporating that housing burden BIPOC households factor and data that we would by including that kind of PIT count data that Director Sparrow's team had. I'll also flag that the underproduction data from the ONA methodology does incorporate housing for the homeless as part of that methodology. And that data, obviously, as we all know, shows deep racial disparities as well. So yeah, I just wanted to raise that we did talk about and think about that and are proposing moving forward with kind of this methodology that we've presented before. And yeah, so just as a reminder, these are the ONA regions, so everything, and we aggregated a few of them to make it kind of simpler breakout. Basically everything east of the Cascades, the dark blue, the light blue, and the purple are the Eastern Oregon region. The metro region is the orange region there, that are the 3 metro counties, and then everything else west of the Cascades is the Western region. So the geographic set-asides break out as such, with 15% of general capital resources going to Eastern Oregon. Metro receives 40% of those resources, and Western Oregon receives 45% of those resources there. Also flagging, these are really seen as with the volume of resources. I think these are safety valves. We want to ensure that there isn't one region that can come in and get all of the resources, but we do imagine these being undersubscribed initially and hope that this will sufficiently finance a lot of the housing that's coming in right now that we're seeing through intake forms. We feel really confident in how these set-asides are broken out and being able to support all these communities. And the 25% off the top, I think, is turning out to be a really valuable safety valve.
Great, thank you. And then next, I guess, wait, should I pause there? Any questions, conversation on the subsidy? I mean, before we get to subsidy, on the set-asides? Okay. Okay, so I will move forward to cost controls. And this is bringing this back with an update on subsidy limits. And it's also in your Housing Stability Council packet. I think what we've talked about over the last several months has been, looking at cost controls and what are the implications and impacts of having moving outside of the competitive space. I think part of what our scoring process has been able to do is to give priority and preference to projects that needed less resources or had lower costs, which is usually why they needed lesser resources. And I think, again, if we're thinking about what does that incentivizes early estimates that are not going to be able to be viable through the project in some cases. And I don't think that those are necessarily dubious strategies, but they are, let's try to make it work with what we are able to offer, and let's be relatively optimistic in that. And so I think as we step into the ORCA and think about this process, which is, again, getting into aligning with the development process, giving earlier conditional commitments that become finalized and full commitments much later in the process, gives us an opportunity to change that dynamic. And we want to make sure we are still doing our job of stewarding resources, making sure that there is leverage of private equity and private debt wherever possible, where other resources and community or across the nation could be access to leverage state investments. That is the right answer. And those are still the behaviors we want to incentivize. And so if as we're thinking about that, really wanting to strategically understand cost controls in 3 different ways, one of which is subsidy, and I'll dig in on that next. And that is how much of state resources are we going to put into projects to get a unit? The other part is, what are our policies? When we are designing our policies and our structures, want to make sure that we're not incentivizing high costs in areas where they do not need them. And so things like, when developers build a project, they receive a developer fee. That's usually a percentage of the total project costs. And that's what they are paying themselves to do the work and to assume the risk of doing the project. And I think earlier this morning, we were talking about the ownership risk and the developer risk of taking on these investments. It is not safe, and there is a reason why you should get a developer fee to assume that risk. But the dollar of that risk doesn't change if your project costs go higher. And so as a project comes in and says, I need X dollars for developer fee initially, if your interest rate increases, your risk level still hasn't increased. So I think wanting to make sure that we have policy controls in place that are saying, we're going to hold to standards here. We want to make sure we are evaluating costs, getting detailed costs that are substantiated through third parties and through contractors and cost estimates. These are all largely existing processes that are being now framed up and really so that we can talk about and understand them in the scheme of the whole. And then we have our subsidy limits. We have previously introduced and shared early draft estimates. I think knowing that we needed to get a lot of input about them last month provided, that early first blush. We've since in the past month have drafted updates to those, conducted a survey on the updates. So this will be 2 surveys done on these subsidy limits. The last last survey that we got detailed responses from well over 50 respondents and a lot of detailed conversations, information provided. I think that there was a large mix of impact of conversation and feedback on those. And while some organizations felt like there were projects that were viable with the prior limits, the overwhelming majority was saying that they were insufficient and that we needed to make sure that we were building resources that could deploy into projects that were viable in urban and rural communities. So I think this recasted view has done a few different things. One of the things is that we now see a different set of limits for urban versus rural. And that is in direct reflection of the fact that area median incomes in rural communities are substantially lower than in urban communities. And so because the AMIs are lower, the rent collections are lower, and they would have lower ability to pay for mortgage debt, to pay the ongoing debt to the project. And it is not the case that other aspects of project operations and costs are significantly lower as well. So I think the idea that a building still needs to be built with the money, and so we needed to right size that. So really moved the subsidy limits in rural communities up 1 step from the urban counterparts. And so you'll see that that's that discretion. It's a step higher. We have recasted the way that we are looking at subsidy limits. It still looks relatively complicated, but in the past we had different subsidy limits in each fund offering that we did. So there were just little variations across them. Some were by bedroom size, some were by unit. Some had boosts for different types of activities and some didn't. And so it's really bringing all of those together. We've identified here subsidy limits by area median income served, knowing that when you are collecting higher rent for a unit, that you are able to feed more of your operations for that, so you'll be able to have a little bit more debt on it. I think there's also acknowledging across all of this that there are countless influencing factors on subsidy and costs to projects, whether it's what is your location, what kind of infrastructure needs does your project have, what are you building on, is it are you in rocky area? Are you in soil? Are you building 3 stories or 4 stories? Is there an elevator? Do you need parking? All of those aspects are just really countless down the lines around driving project costs. So there is also no one solution to any of it. But we are scaling here by bedroom size. It costs more to build a 3-bedroom unit than a 1-bedroom unit or a studio. And we are scaling by AMI. We have different subsidy limits here for new construction versus acquisition and rehab. We are now also offering you'll see it listed at the bottom, an additional $200,000 per project where you are addressing unique functional building needs to meet tenant safe and healthy. So this could be an agricultural workforce project that needs a specific community area to address transition from work to home in a way to keep your family safe and protected from the chemicals out in farms. I think there's other types of places that children or family-oriented housing might need. And so that idea that those are building investments, not specific to the number of units in a project, but that we're looking at them holistically. And these are not going to be resources that will fit every project's needs. And I think our goal here is to find the projects where these are good fits and where we can get the units developed. And so the large project, like the projects that need tax credits, should wait for tax credits. The projects that are needing a lot more resources, maybe that is a project that doesn't need to go out as affordable housing. Maybe there's other components or aspects to it. And part of this whole strategy for both the upfront consultation from the early intake process and the advisor team to be able to provide clear and consistent information to developers across the state is to be able to unpack that earlier than when you're submitting an application. We balance all of that with wanting to be responsive as we are moving projects forward. And as we were talking about earlier, Councilmember Lee, how do we get to the place where we are not creating the future conversation, hopefully quite as often, where I am saying we have a unique market situation and let's talk about that for this project. And so really wanting to build into here clear numbers that we will work to, where projects don't need all of this high subsidy and they can leverage debt. We want to be able to see that through our underwriting process in terms of our debt coverage ratio. Where do we see that projects could get more debt from a bank to be able to do this and let us not use all of our subsidy so that we can get more units? I think those are all still, this really careful balance. And we are testing a lot, and it's very exciting in the ORCA transition. And I think there are just a lot of critical areas where we'll need to pay really close attention. But we are so this is the recommended coming out of several cycles of engagement around here. So proposing these as the subsidy limits and retaining some discretion for OHCS to be able to approve modest increases above these. I think characterize those as around 10%. So having a little bit of buffer. So as that project is ready to start going and they say, oh my gosh, I'm shy this much, we have something to be able to respond in that moment, but in that vein of it feeling and being reasonable. And so I think this is obviously very integrally impacted and tied to the idea of how many units can we get from our resources and how do we make sure that we are maximizing the impact. And fundamentally, it will be important that our resources are viable, and where we are asking projects to try to make a budget that is too lean, we are unlikely to see units produced at the worst case, and certainly not with the tenant aligned, equity and racial justice aligned impacts that we know cannot be a choice in the work that we do. And I think that those are all kind of tied and reflected into here. So it's a pretty weighty recommendation. And I think it is these are higher subsidy limits than we have put into place in the past. And take that with gravity and are trying to kind of navigate that balance of maximizing units, but wanting to be responsive to real project needs. And these are all conversations, as I've indicated earlier, where we are bringing this forward. We will want to be implementing with these structures in place and evaluating and measuring as we go forward, where we need to make some pivots, where we see that there are projects or challenges that need to be that require really a response from us as the state to say that we need to think about doing this differently. And I think with that, that wraps up our presentation on these. And so any discussion is welcome, but this would be, we have another recommendation to come next on our evaluation standards. But this slate would be what I would represent as our ORCA set-asides and funding resource frameworks, including subsidy limits.
Thank you. Council questions or discussion? Then could I ask if someone is ready to, oh, Councilmember Mena. Go ahead, please.
I just want to commend Natasha and the team. This is a huge overhaul and a lot of work has been done, and the way you have approached the work and engaged on multiple levels, the industry, the community, and trying to find a solution to a very difficult problem is amazing. And so, looking forward to see how this works and ways to improve on the system. So great work.
Yeah.
Okay. And Councilmember Rogers.
Yes, I would like to also commend Natasha and her team and just putting all this together, because it is a lot of work, and it's also overwhelming because it's a lot of information. But I would just like to know, as far as going forward, are we going to put some time frames for revisiting how it's working and whether or not we need to tweak something going forward?
Yes, thank you very much, Councilmember Rogers. I think absolutely yes. I think I am internally, we are going to be tracking ongoing basis. I think as Roberto was indicating earlier, have the team is structured in weekly check-ins that go kind of dig in on the details. And I am intending that we continue that oversight, where we're bringing the project issues, challenges up higher on a regular cadence. And I think, I think noting that, as I was, indicating earlier, transparency is a part of this. And so wanting to make sure that as we are, I think, and that is a new thing, right? So transparency, not only about what resources, but where we have projects moving forward. And so the idea where we will be able to understand when a project is coming forward and saying, I need resources, we will know, we'll be able to say when that project is not a fit or when the resources are insufficient. So we'll be able to do that as an early indicator. Next, we'll be talking about evaluation standards, and part of evaluation standards will require Housing Stability Council approval of transactions in that, and intending for those to be earlier in the process so that we can get the conversations about your direction for the projects that we can incorporating as they go. So we'll have more talk about the evaluation process next. This morning or this afternoon, now we've crossed over. And then I think we'll need to at least have, I guess I'm hoping that we can do quarterly updates with Housing Stability Council on how it's going. And most certainly annual reviews of how, whether we need substantial changes in any places. And there might be times when we're not going to wait the full year. So I don't want to wait to an artificial time to say, yikes, something needs to change. So where we're seeing a real confluence and trends of that, but I am intending that we are building that in and being able to provide regular updates here, but also having transparent dashboards about projects and where those resources are being held.
Okay, I need to interrupt.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry. I need to interrupt at this point. We are on the verge of starting to lose members, and I want to make sure we can take this vote without, being delayed by lack of quorum. Is there
So moved.
anybody, excuse me?
So moved. I'll skip my comments and get to the move.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. We'll start with Councilmember Meehan, since you need to.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And for the record, Councilmember Diafontorum has also had to leave early. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Great, thank you. It's very
Yeah.
exciting. I don't want to undercut the excitement. We do have one other motion still
Okay.
forthcoming.
Okay.
And so I am, this is a revisit of our prior month conversation. So I think I'm wondering if we should try to fast track through that, or if there's other guidance on consideration of evaluation standards.
Okay, any strong sentiments on this from the council?
If we could fast track, that would be greatly appreciated, because I do need
Okay.
to leave.
Let's do that.
Okay, great. So Rick, we're gonna ad hoc here a little bit. Okay, so I will, so this is, as we said, we're transitioning outside of competitive space into standards. This is establishing what our standards are. And I think we've just talked about commitment to making sure that we are evaluating where these are not impactful or successful in getting projects through. I think I wanted to acknowledge here, I believe Housing Stability Council did receive some public comment from, I believe, the city of Eugene around location standards that are being implemented into this. We have communicated and been in touch with the city and actually now all public funders around the caveats and characters of the of those location standards. The idea is that we are putting into place standards that are ensuring that tenants have opportunity to be able to be supported, whether that's green space or transit. And we have been really working and seeking to very deliberately respond to what we are hearing from community, and that they need to be able to have some controls. And so places where there may not be park access, they could put a green space or playground into their project to be able to meet those standards. And I think, so finding like lots of ways to say, yes, we need to have opportunity and community, and let's be really thoughtful about how we bring that together. So we'll be continuing to evaluate that, making sure that we are bringing any concerns or challenges moving forward. And then I think, Rick, I'm maybe just going to do a quick scroll through here so we can just take a couple minutes to say,
Yeah, okay, so do you want me to jump in, Natasha?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
if we
okay,
just want to
okay,
do really quick, I think.
Yes, I'll go as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Chair Hall, Director Bell, Housing Stability Council members, my name is Rick Ruzicka. For the record, I am the AD of Planning and Policy, he, him pronouns. This presentation was largely given to you last month, so we'll go really quick. I'm filling in for Love Johnson, who provided it for you. As Natasha said, this is part of our ORCA process. It's about evaluation standards. We'll need to do evaluation standards in really 3 steps of the process. That's the impact assessment, the financial eligibility, and the commitment phase. We have done a REIT on this, the racial equity analysis tool. We have made changes to the document or to the standards based upon that REIT. So it is something that influenced this particular document or this process. The impact assessment is the first real kind of step of the application process. There are some pre-existing standards that we used to do that we've carried over into this phase. Those are all listed here. Basically, all of those apply if applicable. Obviously, like PSH isn't going to apply for all standards, but most of these are going to apply for all applications that enter this impact assessment phase. We have enhanced some standards as well. So all of these were things that happened before, but we've modified them to a different state, location preferences, and diversity and equity, inclusion, and MWESB. I'll go through. Let's start with the DEI agreement. That used to be a process where basically we had a commitment from a partner, and now we're moving into a goal and a results model, where the partner will share a goal that they want to achieve, and then at the end of that process, they'll report on their progress of that goal. And so it's more of a give and take versus just a commitment letter. So it's ramping that up. In terms of MWESB strategy, in the past, partners had goals that they tried to achieve. Going forward, they'll still have those same goals, but if they do not achieve them, the next time they come in for funding, they'll have to provide a strategy on how they're going to reach it this time, and will require them to work with an MWESB contractor to make sure that those goals are actually achieved. If you're a new developer and have never been through our process before, we are going to ask for a strategy associated with reaching your MWESB goal. Location preferences is something Natasha touched on before. I won't rehash, just that there's a couple different opportunities or options that a developer can utilize if trying to meet one of these location preferences. They can meet 2 of 6 opportunity area criteria or 2 of 5 anti-displacement categories. So there's 2 different pathways for them to go, and the criteria include intentional ways for projects to meet criteria with investments through the pathway. And Natasha gave a great example of, if there's no community green space in the area, then they could create a community green space. They could co-locate with early childhood and education program within their facility, for example, is another great way for them to kind of create an area that would meet our criteria. There's some new standards associated with impact assessment as well. And equity and racial justice strategies is probably the one that I would want to focus on. Of the standards, the ERJ requirements are a particular note. As you can see, there are some new requirements and some optional pathways for projects around the state, which we anticipate will enhance ERJ project outcomes. So we're really excited about that. The financial eligibility stage is the next stage in the process. We do have some existing standards associated with that as well that we'll carry forward. There are some enhanced standards, particularly construction costs. Natasha, I'm a couple slides ahead of you. And there's some new standards associated with policy changes that are carried forward from the impact assessment process before. The third step is the commitment step. And there are also some pre-existing standards that we moved over from the NOFA process. And then there's a new standard around financial closing date commitment. That's a really important one to really try to make sure that projects are ready when they get to this phase and can close out their project within that appropriate time frame, to really try to avoid some of the cost issues that you're seeing with our first presentation of the day. I know I went through that really, really quickly. I hope that I still provided you with enough information to make a decision, but happy to answer any questions for you.
Council, questions?
I will just say of very limited importance. I've never seen Rick talk quite so fast on content so deep. So just big up to you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. So again, one more time, any council input? Or are we ready for a motion?
I move the motion.
Who seconds the motion?
Second.
Okay, can we have the roll call on the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
For the record, Councilmember Mena has left the meeting.
Okay.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Thank you. With the 5 remaining council members, we do have quorum and we have passed this motion.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And Director Bell, any last minute additions to the agenda or things to note before I bring the virtual gavel down?
We do have one more, Chair
Oh,
Hall, apologies. I
sorry.
know we just had a
I
very
thought-
exciting
oh,
one,
come
and
on,
this one
come on.
is
Okay.
significantly
Keep going.
less exciting, but still really
Okay.
important. So would love, yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
as long as we still have 5 to vote, we're good.
I'll go through this one fast too.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you all for the last couple of presentations. Again, so exciting. And this is a total shift in gears. This is the construction loan guarantee program. I introduced this back in January. Apologies for not updating the title slide. This is for a motion for a vote to approve the framework presented today and back in your council packet for the request for applications for this new program. Reminder, we received $20 million in the last legislative session to establish a construction loan guarantee program or to pass through for a CDFI, a nonprofit community development financial institution, to establish a construction loan guarantee fund. Premise being the market conditions right now are really challenging, and the legislative investment was a deliberate strategy to support development in this current financial market by allowing folks to receive a guarantee, which would hopefully stimulate lending to projects that might otherwise struggle to receive those construction loans. To solicit that CDFI, we are going to do a procurement and a request for applications. That process is underway, and we are excited. Statutory requirements from the bill language was it had to be a nonprofit CDFI to develop the fund. The fund has to be used for construction loans and guarantees of repayment for those construction loans. The loans being guaranteed have to be for projects that are restricted to low or moderate income households, which was defined as up to 120% of AMI. And the loan guarantees could not exceed 5-year terms. In addition to that, there were agency priorities that we wanted to incorporate primarily around equity and racial justice, trying to ensure that there was some level of prioritization or differentiation in guarantees made for small, rural, culturally specific organizations, the same ones that we're having the set-asides for. We wanted them to identify sort of where those historic disparities in lending practices are and be able to hopefully flag some potential issues in their risk models that might be leading to some of these organizations not getting flagged in the first place or getting these loans in the first place, in addition to using this guarantee to support those organizations. Also wanting this to support projects that leverage other agency resources, both in terms of our compliance standards and our affordability requirements and restrictions and length of those affordability standards, but also with these ERJ standards that we have in the ORCA process that I think have been increased dramatically, and want to see all projects accessing our resources be held to. So I think having this connect to our resources has a lot of benefits, primarily being that requirement for equity and racial justice practices and strategies. Additionally, adding options that would allow for the guarantee to be used in creative ways that allow the project to continue moving forward, that wouldn't just sink the entire deal. How do we, get creative about how this is being implemented and not just have it be that repayment once everything is dead? How we prioritize guarantees for loans that do have that lower AMI target than the 120? Can we target projects that have deeper subsidy? Can we emphasize kind of the sustainability of this program generally through feasibility, longevity, and productivity? How are we getting the most bang for our buck and ensuring that these projects make it through to construction? So in the RFA that we have laid out now, we have these 4 criteria for the evaluation standards. This will be hopefully released pending your approval in the coming weeks. So any CDFIs still listening, be on the lookout for that. I would say if you have not signed up for technical advisories, please do, because this will be releasing shortly. We have questions on the governance structure, which generally includes capacity questions, experience, accountability of the organization, We have questions around equity, diversity, inclusion, which includes those questions around historic disparities and addressing them, and prioritization structures for culturally specific organizations or other historically marginalized groups. The prioritization category is mostly around that kind of efficiency and sustainability, but also includes that question around deeper AMI than required, and how that compliance is going to work for projects that do not have OHCS resources. I think that's a really critical component of this, given the legislative requirements. And lastly, just budget to incorporate administrative costs review of that and evaluate folks against one another. Timeline would be, again, pending approval here. RFAs we're hoping to release in the coming weeks. It's very close. Then we would receive responses and score them, and hopefully by Q3 we'll be having a grant agreement in place and do the award and initial implementation. I did want to flag that we will come back to you all for approval of the grant agreement. We have received that direction from DOJ that based on authority, we would want your approval of the grant agreement itself. So you will be able to see kind of who came in through the RFA and who we are proposing to award the grant to at that point.
Council questions? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Mitch, for the presentation. This is the part of the plan that I am just going to say I feel the most not ambivalent about, but questioning in some ways. And I think, I'll support it. I understand it. There is a challenge when we outsource some of our oversight and engagement work to a third party, right? In some ways, we could be losing some ability to influence, and we're sort of taking a secondhand seat, right, to some of the use of our evaluation criteria and the application of our priorities, right? And in other ways, we gain a voice and a relationship that we can't have because we're the state with various communities and other entities that are out there. So I get this is the way to go. I understand this is a common practice, and I feel a little ambivalent about it. And I just wanted to share that with the group, but I am in supportive of it.
Okay, any other council feedback? Then Mary, you seem to be our motion maker, at least for today, so please.
So moved.
And where's the second?
Second.
Now can we have roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, great. Director Bell, anything else for the good of the order today?
No, nothing further.
All right, then I will adjourn this meeting. Wish you all well and see you next time.